From outside the NH Lingato Congress Hotel and the 8 Gallery Mall in Turin, Italy, this is Josh Friedman reporting on day 4, the final day of Bilderberg 2018. In this video, I'm going to raise some curiosities and some questions I have as this 2018 Bilderberg Conference is wrapping up. I would posit that this conference looked dramatically different from the outside than it did from the inside. However, I was not in the conference. I was not inside the 2018 Bilderberg Conference, so I cannot say for sure, but I'm going to explain briefly why I believe that is the case. So here in Turin, Italy, over the past 4 days, and arguably even longer than that, there has been a very heavy-handed police presence, a very heavy-handed policing of journalists. The few journalists who have been here, myself included, to cover the Bilderberg Conference from the outside have been met with quite the policing effort. So many of you are probably aware that I had a run-in with police, actually several police storming into my studio apartment just hours before the conference kicked off. That situation remains very unclear as to exactly what happened and why, albeit I have interviewed another alternative media member who did undergo something quite similar at about the same time, so there's definitely reason to speculate as to a possible connection to something having to do with the policing going on outside the Bilderberg Conference. Nonetheless, journalists have been detained frequently throughout the week, and the police here in Turin have been raising a variety of issues, including frequently using the word terrorism when stopping, detaining, questioning, and even interrogating journalists here on the outside of the conference. And what I've been saying is that it's been a bit of a circus on the outside of Bilderberg 2018, as has been the case at some Bilderbergs in the past. This is definitely not the first time in which there's been heavy-handed policing of journalists outside the conference. Nonetheless, it creates a circus and it really distracts attention from what's going on the inside. Not that we could really know definitively or even close to definitively what's going on the inside, because as you're well aware, the conference operates with Chatham House rules. Basically, the participants are sworn to secrecy. They're not allowed to talk about what's going on inside the conference. Nonetheless, there is some interaction between participants and the media, and I'm going to speak briefly about one of those encounters from yesterday. But before that, I might as well note that you might be able to see up on this rooftop, there's a tent up there, actually a couple tents. That's actually where the 2018 Bilderberg participants were dining last night, and as some journalists were trying to photograph the scene from public places and trying to report on the Saturday night dinner, once again they ran into very heavy-handed policing. But enough about that. Let's discuss the conference, and particularly this interaction yesterday that occurred. So I was among a group of journalists who were outside trying to speak with the various Bilderberg participants who are on their Saturday walks. As is often the case at Bilderberg conferences, on Saturday, the third day of the conference, they tend to go on field trips, which was the case yesterday. A bunch of participants went to the city center. Others also went for jogs or walks in this Lingato area. And in one of the interactions between journalists and participants, it came up from a couple of the participants that they said they were discussing artificial intelligence and that it was one of their favorite or most interesting topics or discussions. And that does corroborate one of the discussion items that was placed on the official Bilderberg agenda, if you could call it that, or topics list for 2018. It was artificial intelligence, and as I've mentioned in a previous report, there has been quite a focus on technology at this conference, and in fact the Bilderberg Group has really been embracing technology for a matter of years. They're very powerful people in the tech world who hold key positions in the Bilderberg Group, or at least they're on the steering committee, so there's definitely been an embrace of technology. And I thought that was interesting in the sense that maybe this interaction shows that Bilderberg is being a little more transparent, and that this topics list that they released, albeit vague, it might not be a red herring. These might actually be the actual topics, or some of the actual topics that they're discussing during the conference. Nonetheless, the answers we got to our questions were very limited. This year there was very little interaction, and particularly interaction of substance outside the conference between journalists and participants. So I think what that leaves me with is, well, a bunch of questions and curiosities, and I've written a few down, and I'm going to raise a few points right now. And it would be lovely if the Bilderberg Group could respond to this in any format, maybe put out a brief statement addressing any or all of these questions and curiosities I have. The first one relates to tech, and I was asking yesterday a couple of participants during this street interview, what is the Bilderberg Group's agenda related to technology? One of them was saying that, well, we're all so involved with technology, or technology has such a big role in all of our lives, and that's the case. I mean, it's the case for all of us, undoubtedly. But I'm very curious. So in this Bilderberg Group, you have politicians, you have businessmen, you have venture capitalists, some of whom are in the tech sphere. You've got bureaucrats, you've got all kinds of people. And on the outside, from critics and journalists, there are all kinds of allegations that are raised and floated. Like, could Bilderberg be embracing technology as an attempt to trot out or float the idea among high circles of some sort of social control, like maybe some Chinese-style social control system in which technology very much restricts what we can and cannot do and can and cannot say. Now, I'm not making that allegation, but the point has definitely been raised by critics of Bilderberg that there could possibly be some ulterior motives to the group's embrace of technology. Well, I don't know. I mean, I'm curious. So what really interests the Bilderberg Group so much about artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and the other technological issues that they're discussing and focusing on? Are they interested from an investing perspective? Are they interested from an entrepreneurial perspective, from an innovative perspective? Are they interested in technology as it applies to governance, possibly as it applies to social control? I don't know. Maybe is it all the above? If the Bilderberg Group could address that, that would be, I think, very worthwhile, and it might be something worth including on the frequently asked questions section of the Bilderberg Group's website. Now, kingmaking. This is a huge allegation the group faces constantly, and the Democratic governor of Colorado was here, and some people are arguing that, well, he might be a potential challenger in the 2020 presidential election in the US. It's been raised repeatedly that several very high-ranking politicians, including presidents, prime ministers, chancellors, have come to Bilderberg before rising to high office. And this year there's speculation that the Secretary of State from the Vatican could possibly be rising up to the Pope. I don't know if there really is solid reason to think that, but nonetheless, this Bilderberg group has been labeled numerous times as a group of kingmakers, and there is some evidence to back that up. So at this event, are certain politicians, in a sense, trying out for high office? Was that occurring this weekend? Has that occurred in the past? I would love to get an answer to that question. Now, just some personal curiosities relating to the topics list or agenda for this year's conference. I'm very curious about how the Middle East plays into the 2018 Bilderberg Conference. So, Saudi Arabia and Iran was a topic on the topics list, and right now there are certainly heated relations between Saudi Arabia and Iran, and they seem to have boiled over across the region, and it seems like there are various powers throughout the world that are picking sides and getting involved in the proxy conflicts involving both Saudi Arabia and Iran, which ties to Syria and much more in the Middle East. Now, it's an interesting time in the sense that the Bilderberg Group is so focused on transatlantic relations and the rift right now in transatlantic relations between the Trump administration in the US and the European Union. And on the Iran issue, that's a big rift right now. The Trump administration pulled out of the Iran deal. The EU remains very supportive of the Iran deal. Now that's sparking a bit of a trade war, and there are all kinds of sanctions issues, and it's very unclear what's going on both economically and politically between the US and EU over Iran policy. Now, Saudi Arabia, people outside the conference are concerned about there being some grander war. I mean, maybe even involving Russia. Saudi Arabia is very much involved in the military conflict in Syria and has been basically aligned with the West on that. My curiosity isn't so much about the grander geopolitics of Saudi Arabia as it relates to global conflicts, at least regarding this Bilderberg meeting, but I'm curious. So I noticed, and I brought this up in my report before the conference, that Klaus Kleinfeld, the head of the NEOM project, Saudi Arabia's planned mega future city in the northwest of the country, is attending here. So is that how Saudi Arabia perchance relates directly to the 2018 Bilderberg Conference? Is Bilderberg going to be endorsing or involved at all in this NEOM project? Or are they looking into future cities or futuristic cities elsewhere in the world? I know Peter Thiel, who's on the steering committee, is interested in seasteading. I don't know. I mean, could Saudi Arabia be a sign of how Bilderberg is interested in the future? I don't know. Maybe this is merely having to do with conflicts in the Middle East. I also noticed there are a bunch of people from Turkey who are attending this year's conference. Turkey, as it heads into its election less than 2 weeks from now, exactly 2 weeks from today, is sliding more in the direction of Saudi Arabia and Iran. It's sliding more in the direction of authoritarian Muslim Middle Eastern country as opposed to more of a Western NATO ally or European-style democracy. So what's the Bilderberg relationship with Turkey, and how does that play into the grander Middle East and geopolitical issues? The Bilderberg group doesn't tend to draw members from further east than Turkey. So is Turkey an anchor to Bilderberg influence? I don't know. These are questions I would raise relating to the Middle East. Wrapping things up, there's one more region that I am particularly interested in. That's because I live there. It's the Balkans. The Balkans are not usually represented at Bilderberg, but this year the Serbian Prime Minister, Anna Brnabic is in attendance, and I know she was invited following her her appearance at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland earlier this year, and she speaks at various international events and often impresses. But is Bilderberg interested in the Balkans? Right now, the EU is wrapping up a 6-month period in which it has placed increasing focus, at least in theory, on reeling in the Western Balkans and combating arguably Russian, Chinese, and even Turkish influence in the region and integrating the Western Balkans into the West. So is Bilderberg interested in the Balkans? A little, not at all, a lot, perchance. There were more people from Eastern Europe than usual. The Prime Minister of Estonia was here, so yeah, it's another region of the world that has major geostrategic importance, and I'm curious what Bilderberg's perspective is on that. So I've got a bunch of questions. I'm leaving here with a bunch of questions. I'm trying not to focus on the heavy-handed policing that has really characterized the Bilderberg experience for those on the outside. If the Bilderberg group would like to address any of these questions, that would be fantastic. You can put them up on your frequently asked questions, or maybe not so frequently asked questions, or put out a press release or a press statement, or email me directly. That would be wonderful, but I don't really know what to expect. Bilderberg remains very much secretive to us on the outside, and this report is dragging on, so I'm going to wrap things up from outside the NH Lingotto Hotel and the old Fiat factory complex here in Turin, Italy. Thank you very much for tuning into my 2018 Bilderberg coverage. I hope to be seeing you in the near future, as well as upcoming Bilderbergs in upcoming years. So, ciao from Turin, Italy.